Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Whew, I'm out of breath like going upstairs. Well, that's Vince D'Addario. Vince, boy, we got a lot to talk about today.
As we normally do on a Monday, but even more so, I feel like today.
Yeah, you see me out of breath. That's one of those setups to talk for a minute so I can catch my breath. I just sprinted upstairs and downstairs. First time ever Vince has been short-winded. Big news of the day. Big news of the day. Brian Kelly announced that Kyle Hamilton, the All-American safety for Notre Dame, is already out for the matchup against North Carolina.
Big deal.
This is big news, Vince.
Like that's not saying, oh yeah, big deal. No, big deal. It's a big deal. But as Marcus Freeman, if I'm Marcus Freeman, I like the fact that I know now as opposed to it happening in the first quarter. So, at least you know how to prepare that you're not going to have 14 in the lineup. That's all I'm going to say. It still sucks.
I'm going to for Marcus Freeman, it's better to know now, but it's also better for North Carolina to know now.
Absolutely.
The reason I say that is because what's the first thing people are going to say? Well, it's no big deal because they beat North Carolina without Kyle Hamilton last year. Okay.
True.
North Carolina didn't have a week to game plan for how to attack Notre Dame without Kyle Hamilton. They had 10 minutes.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
It's going to be a little bit easier for them to sit down and say, hey, look, Kyle Hamilton is out. These are the safeties. Let's look at them. This is how we're going to attack them.
Sure.
And it's not a formidable duo. A lot of pressure on DJ Brown.
And a lot of pressure on Houston Griffith.
And Brian Kelly said today, which concerns me even more, that this automatically triggers Isaiah Pryor to be a safety.
Right.
Now,
and he played safety.
He
played safety
against
last
USC.
week.
But as I have said to people a million times, do not ever judge the long-term success on what a guy does the first time he plays when no one has seen film of him at that position.
Right.
Isaiah Pryor's played 0 snaps at safety prior to the USC game. North Carolina is going to have film of what Isaiah Pryor looks like at safety. So that's a concern for me. There's a reason he moved from safety to rover.
He couldn't cover.
Despite all the depth issues they have at safety, there's a reason he stayed there. I'm concerned that you're not able to develop younger players. Xavier Watts, KJ Wallace, Justin Walters. You're going to put a guy back there that we all know cannot cover against a team that is going to throw the ball a lot. They run a lot too. Now, if they're going to do a situation, Vince, I'll say this. Here's my caveat.
I know where you're going. Yep.
If they're going to do sort of a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5 with 5 true defensive backs on the field, and Isaiah Pryor is the third safety, I feel a little better about that. Him
because
it's
almost like a hybrid rover role. I mean, where his eyes are going to, for the most part, be in the backfield, and he's going to be coming up on run support, et cetera. Now, there's still going to be some coverage opportunities for him where we'll see what happens. But yes, I agree with you. If he's the third safety, it's probably not as bad as if he's just literally lining up in center field out there. That worries me a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you're Notre Dame, this is troubling because North Carolina now has a full game week to prepare on how to attack you without Kyle Hamilton. I think my thing that I would say is this is going to go one of two ways for Marcus Freeman as far as his game plan and preparation. One is, hey, look, let's definitely play a bend but don't break. Look, we're going to see a repeat of USC, but more.
Right.
Because we have to limit the big plays because Sam Howell is the best deep ball thrower in college football, in my opinion, both from he throws a pretty deep ball and the success. I mean, he's hit more. I think I saw a Pro Football Focus stat. He's hit significantly more balls that have traveled 20, 30 yards down the past line of scrimmage than anyone in college football by a lot.
Yeah.
So there's two schools of thought. One is play off and don't let him take those shots and then trust that your 3-4 down is good enough to get to him before then. Yep. Or 2, be aggressive. Go 4 down, attack. Don't give him those shots. The danger there, however, again, that I don't want to spin that since that's my preferred method of attack. That's just what I like. I don't want to spin that and make it sound like that's the best way because the danger there is the more guys you bring on pressure, the less you have over top. You don't have to do a full 5-step gather throw to hit deep when you're bringing more guys, because somebody's going to be in man coverage. He can catch, hit, and throw it. And now you have your great eraser on the back end of the defense is now gone. That puts Marcus Freeman in a genuinely tough spot to be at this point in time.
I agree. And I'm interested to see how he compensates, because when you are in the middle of a game and something happens, it's like triage. You throw some stuff at it and you hope it sticks, and you try to live to, see another day, which they did. Now you've got some time to plan, and you've got some time to maybe see some guys in some different roles during practice. And I guess I'm going to be the glass, the cup is half full guy. And I'm going to hope that this is going to allow Marcus Freeman to be a little bit more creative and not just put a guy in Kyle's spot.
I don't think it's about glass half full or glass half empty. It's just about, here's the analysis and here's the option. I don't really care to be glass half full or glass half empty. It's just, here's the situation. And
I think I'm more referring to the people in the chat,
Yeah.
But look, this is an opportunity for guys to step up. Right. And it's an opportunity for Marcus Freeman to throw a little bit of something else at a team. And so, we'll see what happens. Now, would I have liked it if it was happening against Navy as opposed to North Carolina? Yeah, absolutely. But this is what it is, man. And here we are. So this is obviously something we're going to be keeping an eye on. It's probably going to be one of the keys to the game. It's going to be one of the matchups. This is going to be important to the success of Notre Dame's defense. No question.
Yeah, no question. And again, this is one of those times when it's one thing to say, okay, whoever's going to replace Kyle Hamilton has to step up. At this point in time, it goes beyond that. This is also about, okay, it's time for other guys to step up. Hey, Houston, you're not replacing Kyle, but now you're the veteran. You're the guy. We need you to step up. Need you to play better.
Yep.
Hey, Cam, we need you to have a big game. Hey, Clarence, you got to do this. Hey, Isaiah Foskey, buddy, we need you to be Lawrence Taylor this week. I mean, you don't say that specifically, but you get hey, Myron, time the ball. Hey, Jason Adamiola, this is a money game for you. I mean, that's kind of what – and it's sort of that backup quarterback syndrome that I've talked about on offense. For decades, people fall in love with the backup quarterback because he comes in, you're like, man, just the offense just clicks so well with that guy.
Right.
Well, a lot of times, and then you see it in the NFL and you see it in college football where, people say, oh, you got to get rid of Spencer Rattler because the offense doesn't click, play Caleb Williams. Well, then Caleb Williams comes out and they don't score a point in the first half against Kansas and struggle to beat Kansas. Well, had the same thing happen to Spencer Rattler, people would have lost their minds and booed him and all this. But with Caleb Williams, it's okay because he's the backup quarterback, right? He's the shiny toy. But that's one scenario. The other scenario is a guy's not as good as Caleb Williams. You put him in, he moves the offense, things look great because the other team has no film on him. They don't know what calls you're going to make with him, all these other things. In the NFL, we see this all the time where, that guy goes out and gets a huge contract from the NFL and to be a starting quarterback somewhere, and lo and behold, they find out quickly, oh, that's why he was a backup quarterback for that other team. But what happens in that moment for that game or two, that he's in there, people rally. Hey, I got to pick up my game because our quarterback's out.
Absolutely.
That's what's got to happen this week on defense. Hey, Kyle's out. So Jason Adamiola, you got to up your game. Isaiah, you got to up your game. Myron, Kurt, Drew, JD, Kaiser, Pryor, Houston, Clarence. I mean, just Cam, DJ, Xavier Watts. Hey, man, you're going to get some reps this week, baby. Go make some plays. Force me to put you on the field. And hopefully if he does do that, they still play him. Because, hey, we've known instances where guys have played great in practice and the coaches still don't play him. I don't know what Marcus Freeman's track record is on that, so I'm not going to assume he's going to do that.
Right.
But that's what's got to happen. It's not just about the replacement for – because here's the deal. If you beat me off the ball – and I get beat as a safety, but the quarterback's laying on his backside, a lot less chance I'm going to get burned, right? So, if Drew White makes a couple tackles for loss, J.D. Bertrand makes a couple tackles for loss on second down, and now I know that you're going to throw, I'm going to say for prediction, right? So it's going to have to be a great team defense this week. Agreed. Ultimately, that's the best way to overcome it. It's not Marcus Freeman's game plan. It's not the person who replaces Kyle has to play like Kyle. It's the 10 guys around that guy have to step their game up, be locked in, and say, hey, we got you. If DJ Brown's that guy, if it's Pryor, if it's Xavier Watts, hey, buddy, you do your job. You're not Kyle. Don't worry about trying to beat Kyle. You do your job. We're going to pick you up. And that's what great teams do. I mean, we saw that last year with Alabama, right? I mean, Alabama loses Landon Dickerson in the SEC title game. The rest of the line said, hey, don't worry about it, Chris Young. We got you, right? You just go out and play your game, and we got your back. And, and they play great and win the title. That's what Nerds have to do for at least this week. I would, we'll talk about this next week, but I would strongly consider not playing him next week, even if he's healthy, against that Navy chop, those cuts.
And there's no point. I mean,
there's a point because he could make 25 tackles.
But
he's rangy safety in the middle of the field can make a lot. I mean, there's a point in that regards that he could have a great game and you could win. Sure. But you don't need Kyle Hamilton to beat Navy. And if you do, you got a much bigger problem as a football team.
You don't need him to beat Navy, and you don't need he doesn't need the Navy game to boost his draft stock. That kind of great stuff. Point. It's not point. From both angles. I don't think it's even necessary. Make sure he's 100%.
Right. Because you're going to need him to beat Virginia.
If he's not good enough to play versus not good enough. That's not what I meant. If he's not 100%, health-wise to play against North Carolina, where you need him to play, then don't play him against Navy.
Because the two biggest games they need him for this year are this one and Virginia for the remaining schedule.
Because you needed him last week too.
We're talking about the remaining schedule,
right? Yes,
I mean, you needed him against Cincinnati. You needed him against Wisconsin. I'm talking about moving forward. The two games you need him for left on your schedule are those two games.
Yes.
So you're not going to have for North Carolina. You got to make sure you do everything in your power to make sure he's ready for Virginia.
Right.
That's going to be the key. That's going to 100% be the key.
Agreed.
Got a couple super chats here real quick. JP Buellsfeld, my man. I challenge everyone in IB Nation to support Brian and Vince so they can continue to keep Irish Breakdown going. I'm going to super chat every time I watch the show live. JP, I appreciate that.
You're the man.
Very, very, very much. And of course, I concur with that thought process.
Right.
And of course, we've got some big things coming down the pike, some things I'm working on behind the scenes that I'm very excited about that we're already making moves on. I'm going to put something on the message board probably later tonight. I was going to put it up the other day, but I didn't have time to get to it. I'm going to put that up about just some things that I'm working on next here at Irish Breakdown that we're very excited about.
That's all I'll say. It's exciting. Yep. That's,
fun
stuff.
We also have a super chat from Preston Laypath, who I had a chance to meet, Presley Laypath, who I had a chance to meet this weekend at the tailgate, which I appreciated. He said, sorry if I missed it, but is there any news on Tyree status? It sounded to me, Vince, like he was saying Chris Tyree should be fine, should be good to go.
It's a hopeful, it was him. There was a couple of guys that they were hopeful they're going to get back on this Saturday. It was Tyree, and who else was it? It was a couple of names. I can't remember who it was, but
I didn't write them down. I was too busy talking about Kyle Hamilton. But
no, it
sounded to me like they're going to have a good, clean bill of health, other than the guys who have already like Blake Fisher's out, and I think Kevin Bauman is still out, and those kind of things. But and I also want to respond to something else. People responding to something that we said. I have two people say this. Searcher Green said it. I wouldn't sleep on Navy. Daniel Wade said you can never sleep on Navy. Navy's 1-6.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to sleep on Navy. If you get beat by Navy, it's not because of Navy. It's because you didn't play. It's not. And no one is saying you go out and you take the week off as a team against Navy, but you don't put your 6'4" All-American safety in the game against a team that wants to cut block and chop and cut downfield like Navy does. And if you can't beat Navy without Kyle Hamilton, you have a huge problem on your football program. And you can again. They lost. They're 1-6.
Right. They hung with Cincinnati for a while, but then Cincinnati.
Yes. And Cincinnati played like crap.
Yeah, terrible.
And beat them. Okay. Navy is awful.
Yeah,
they lost to Marshall by 42. They lost to Air Force by 20. Okay. If Notre Dame can't beat Navy without Kyle Hamilton, then Notre Dame has a huge, huge problem as a program.
Right.
Okay. So this isn't about sleeping on Navy. It's about if you can't beat Navy without Kyle Hamilton, then your program's not very strong. Right. And Notre Dame's program is strong. They can beat They can beat Navy without Kyle Hamilton, and they will beat Navy with hopefully they'll beat Navy without Kyle Hamilton. Meaning, I hope he doesn't play.
Right.
Because I just don't want, like you said, I think you nailed it, Vince. I didn't even think about it from this regards. There's nothing he's going to gain for his future by playing against Navy.
Right.
Now, if Navy was 6-1 and this was a Malcolm Perry or a Keenan Reynolds led Navy team, maybe you might have to make a tougher decision. But if you can't, if the guys you have at safety aren't good enough to beat Navy,
right? Yep.
Then you have then there's a huge problem. Huge problem.
Yeah.
So anyway, so
the
look
three
what
guys
Kansas did to Oklahoma. You mean
that's
losing by double digits?
Yeah, exactly.
Guys, if you're going to point an example of a team that lost to a team like that, okay? So if Kyle doesn't play, Notre Dame only wins by 12, okay, I'll take that versus Kyle Hamilton getting chop blocked on the second level when he's flying downhill
for the season.
And he's out for the year, and now his draft status is up in the air. Again, if you can't beat Navy without Kyle Hamilton, then you're not a very good football team. I'm sorry. You're just not. So you guys can keep talking about that. You can have this paranoia about the triple option. I mean, I've seen all types of triple option paranoias. Well, you lose every game after you play the triple option. Yeah, when Notre Dame was an average program, that happened. Now that they've been good the last 5 years, that's not happening anymore. Why? It's not because the triple options changed. It's because you were losing because you stunk, not because – or you were not a healthy program, not because of something the triple option does. So anyway –
the three names that were bantied about by Brian Kelly was Tyree, Ahrensberger, and Zeke Correll. Apparently, were unavailable.
He said back spasms were the issue with Ahrensberger. I didn't hear what he said was the problem with Zeke Correll.
Yeah, but he said those three. They're hopeful that they'll be back, whatever that means. So, all right.
Sometimes I wonder if that was really he was out.
Or it was just kind of a smoke screen, just
to protect him. I mean, in this instance, I'm actually not opposed to that because this is an instance where, let's say, Zeke Correll has been battling some injuries. He could have played, but you know what? He's getting benched. So instead of him being benched per se, it's he's got some injury. He's going to be out, and you protect him that way. But I'm sure he also, I mean, he was ruled out right before the game, so I am sure he had an injury. But it's something that he's been playing with for a while. And
you also have to keep in mind that you don't necessarily want Zeke Correll to just go into the tank because he could very well be the starting center next year.
Correct.
Okay, and
he should be battling for it for sure.
Yeah, and so people, it's not like we're just going to discard Zeke Correll and call it a day. Like there has to be a little bit of massaging. And I'm not saying that. You know what I mean? Like it's not like we're never going to hear from Zeke Correll again. That's all I'm going to. That's what I'll say.
So some other things, Vince, from the press conference. Brian Kelly talked about the offense. And people are asking him about what it looked like, and he made a comment that sounded very familiar to what we've talked about these last couple of days, which he said, it's not so much about what plays you call, it's about tempo and he talked about the run game was built around who's in the box. That is code for RPOs, right? And so they ran a lot of RPOs. They pulled and threw on 8 RPO plays. They handed off on several other RPO plays. So adding that to the offense made the offense look better. The quarterbacks went 7 of 8 throwing on RPOs, which you take away the non-RPO throws, they were in the mid to low 60s completion percentage. You add the RPOs in, the quarterbacks because one of those completions was Tyler Buckner.
Sure.
You add those to the mix, and all of a sudden they're 7 of 8 for 66 yards. They also had several runs off RPOs. And so that was a big part of the game. It was nice to hear him say that. It's a little frustrating, though, because, why did it take you 7? I guess this was my response. Is he said, we're trying to find what works for our offense and how does this do it and all this other kind of stuff. But it's like this. How did you not know this before the season? We've been talking about this since June. Why did it take you until the 7th game of the year to figure out?
And he's like, well, if we had some preseason games, maybe we would have learned them a little sooner. Yeah. What are you talking about, man?
That's what fall camp is for. But
I did not like that response. Look
at your personnel, and how do you not look at what worked in the spring?
Right.
How do you not look at what worked against Florida State and say, hey, this is who we need to be? This is what we've been calling for the summer. That frustrated the heck out of me, but I don't want to focus on that today.
Right.
The thing I want to focus on is the comment he made of, you're going to see a lot more of this. At the end of the day, we can complain and bitch for hours about why did it take you 7 games to figure out what we've been telling you since, I don't know, the 2018 season? but especially about this particular team since the spring. Why did it take you 7 games? We can complain about that. At the end of the day, they seem to be embracing it. Now, hopefully, Brian Kelly allows Tommy Rees to do this for 60 minutes and doesn't put the shackles on him in the second half when they get a lead, which is something he's been doing for, for however many years. But the key for me is it sounds from what Brian Kelly said that this is just kind of – they finally embraced and said, this is who we got to be this year. That's the important part that I want to focus on about this matchup, because that's how this Notre Dame team can combat it. Look, you can't play clock North Carolina to death. Not this team. This team's not capable of that. You can't do that against this team. You've got to be able to score, and you have to be able to, you can control the clock, but you can't do it with your run game. You've got to do it with your whole offense. And that was the key for me. And then moving forward, same against Virginia, same against Stanford. This is who you have to be. And it was encouraging to hear him talk about that.
Agreed. And again, the frustrating part is that it took the bye week for them to self-scout and realize this. I think that part's frustrating. But again, the bottom line is they're going to do it from here on out. And I thought it was funny the way he mentioned I don't know if it was his post-game. I think it must have been his post-game press conference. Oh, wow, we were kind of shocked and it may be surprising to all of you that he's better in the shotgun and getting the ball out quick, because that's not how he grew up, meaning that's not what the Wisconsin offense was like. Jack Cohn then said, he came out after Brian Kelly's like, yeah, that's what I did all through high school, and I was real comfortable with it.
And he look, and it's not like he didn't ever run the shotgun at Wisconsin. I mean, this is why we said back in February and March that we felt Jack Cohn could execute this, and this offense.
Correct. Yes.
And so it was frustrating. But again, I don't want to focus on that because it's frustrating. What I want to focus on is the fact that he's embraced it.
And then we're moving forward.
And they seem to have, at least for a game, and I hope they continue to embrace that. Hey, Kyle, two things are true. 3 things are true, in my opinion. If used correctly, Jack Cohn's your best quarterback. If used correctly. If not used correctly, he's your 3rd best quarterback. But if used correctly, he's your best quarterback. They used him correctly for the most part on Saturday night. And some of that was the things that Brian Kelly – because you heard Brian Kelly talking about today what we talked about last night, which is USC ran a completely different defense against them than what they had prepared for. And so I thought they handled that really well. I did. And so to me, that's one truth. Truth number 2 is Tyler Buchner has to play. Truth number 3 is, but you have to use him correctly as well. With Jack Cohn to really get your quarterback operation going. This was the best we've seen them do that, where it wasn't Tyler starting a series per se, except the series they took over deep in their territory. I believe he started that series late in the game because it was run out the clock mode, that's fine. That's a good time for him. But it was clearly part of the script that on that moment they were going to run Tyler Buchner in the game. Right. On that second series. Clear. It's the second series.
It's very
clearly, because what a script is, just so people who don't understand, usually teams will script somewhere between 10 to 20 plays. Right. Like the magic number for everyone who follows what everyone else does is 15. Right. I've been in games where it's been 10. I've been in games where we kind of went with 20 because we wanted to really focus on some different things. 20 can be a little much. 10 can be a little less. It just depends on the game. But usually it's 10 to 15 plays or 10 to 20 plays you'll script, meaning this is the calls. Right. Yep. I mean, it's literally the script is written on your play sheet. On first down, we're calling this. On second, and then you have your situations that will take you out of it. Right. So if your defense forces a turnover and you get the ball at the 8-yard line, you're not coming out empty 4 verts. If that was on your next play on the script, right? At least you shouldn't if you're a good coach, right? True. So you'll have those situations where if you get in 4th and 1. You may say, okay, hey, we have our 4th and 1, game plan. We're going to go to that and then get back on the script. So there are always circumstances that can take you out for a play or a series. Again, the red zone situation. But you kind of have your script, and it's formation, it's motion, it's personnel, all of it, play call. The only thing that changes is depending on the hash. We may have called it, trips right. And we're going to run this, but the ball's in the right hash, because it's a field play or a boundary play. Right. So it was very clear on that second series, they were still on their script. Now, a script is especially good if you want to push the tempo because everybody knows what's coming because you've actually practiced that script during the week in that order. And so the players know they have it in their scouting report. They know this is the script, this is what we're going with. So it's easier to kind of push the tempo because guys know once you make that call from the sideline, oh yeah, here we go. This is what we practice all week, right? It was obvious that Buckner going in was part of the script because as soon as that one play was over, Vince, you saw it. Buckner runs on and Cone runs off.
It was fast.
And it happened immediately.
Yeah. Yep.
And then as soon as
we hadn't seen it that way all season.
Exactly. And as soon as Buckner completed that second pass, it was just as immediate that they did it back. And so clearly they had that game plan. So again, we can focus on should have figured this out earlier. We knew this back then. I don't care, right?
Yeah,
it's
all true, but it doesn't matter.
This is where we are. And I'm happy that at least today, now this could all be a smoke screen for North Carolina, and they're going to come out in 13 personnel all game. But it sounded like today that Brian Kelly is like, hey, get ready for more of this. Okay.
I hope so.
Sure.
Yeah. I was already having an average day, and then you're like, yeah, they're going to come out against North Carolina 13 person. I'm like, oh God, come on.
I'm saying it could be opposite. I know. Brian Kelly didn't say that. He did say, however, that they're going to keep using Michael Carmody at tight end. So it'll clearly be part of the package. But that was the encouraging thing for me is it sounded like he was saying this is here to stay for this season.
Every dog finds his tail eventually, and this is what has happened, and he found it, so let's move on. That's great. I don't care how we got here, but we're here, and everything he said today concerning the offense was encouraging, and I love it, and if they can build on it, then this is going to be a great second half, and that's how I feel about it. So
we got a big super sticker from Daniel Wade. Thank you, Daniel, very, very, very much for that, even though Daniel's a little bit more paranoid about the triple option than I am. And let's not forget, too, that every Navy team that beat a Notre Dame team was a good Navy team that beat a Notre Dame team. This is not a good Navy team.
No.
The last time Notre Dame lost to Navy was in 2016. That was a 4-8 Notre Dame team and a 9-win Navy team. Prior to that, it was 2011, correct, Vince?
Yeah, I think so.
That was an 8-win Notre Dame team. That was the only. I guess that would be the only except. No, Notre Dame beat them in 2011. It was 2010.
Okay.
Because Brian Kelly's only lost to Navy twice. It's 2010 where they lost to Ricky Dobbs. Remember that Ricky Dobbs quarterback. That was a 9-win Navy team. Notre Dame smoked them in 11, smoked them in 12. 13, it was a close game. I believe trying to look for the score now. It was a close game, 38-34. That was a 9-win Navy team that Notre Dame beat. 2014, Notre Dame beat by 10 an 8-win Navy team. 2015, Navy was 11-2, and Notre Dame beat them by 17. 2016, Notre Dame, who went 4-8, lost by a point.
Right.
To a 9-5 Navy team. 2017, Notre Dame beat Navy and by a touchdown. That was a 7-win Navy team. 2018, Notre Dame beat a 3-10 Navy team by 22 in a game that wasn't that close. Navy scored a bunch late to make it that close.
Is that the one that was in Ireland?
No, that was the one in San Diego.
Okay.
The one in Ireland was 2012.
Gotcha.
They were supposed to play in Ireland in 2020, but
last year.
And then 2019, Notre Dame beat Navy by 32. That was an 11-win Navy team. This is a 1-6 Navy team.
Right.
They are terrible.
Right. And you could be afraid of the triple option all you want, and I get it. Look, I cover a triple option team every Friday night for high school, okay? Mm-hmm. They're really good against teams that are on par with them athletically, that kind of thing, well coached, whatever. When they go up against a team that is far superior from an athletic standpoint, they're bigger, faster, stronger, they struggle. That's the same thing with Navy. Okay, they're gonna compete in the American Athletic Conference for the most part because they have similar guys and similar. Against Notre Dame, it's just for the most part. Okay, Notre Dame is going to have bigger, faster, stronger guys, and they're going to be able to compete better.
And that Cincinnati Navy game that everybody says was a close game, it was 27-10 going into the fourth quarter, and Navy's last touchdown to make it a 7-point game came with 50 seconds left in the game.
Right.
Cincinnati was not at fear of losing that game.
It was a good game
losing that
until
game.
Halftime.
Right. And Cincinnati was playing terrible up in that first half of the game.
I agree.
Anyway, so that's kind of my That's my thoughts on that. And Cincinnati didn't have 300 yards of offense. Didn't even have 300 yards of total offense in that game.
Yeah, their offense is not good.
Right.
And the defense struggles against athletic teams.
Right.
So
and Navy had given up 400 yards against Memphis and SMU. They gave up 9 yards of play to Memphis. Anyway, but I appreciate that super sticker very, very much.
Yeah, no doubt.
Last thing is, Vince, he was asked a question about Kane Madden from someone who talked about it as if, like, you didn't listen to it live, but the question was asked in a way of like, hey, Kane Madden seems to have figured it out and played really well.
What?
And then Brian Kelly answered it like, yeah, he's kind of
that's like putting a ball on the tee for Brian Kelly if you're going to ask him it that way.
I did not understand that at all. Like, are we just missing something? I mean, like, I'm honestly asking this. Is anybody in the chat that's watched Kane Madden? Like, I mean, honestly, are we being – I have to – I mean, because the person who asked the question is someone who I respect, someone who I know breaks the games down.
Really? You're going to have to tell me who that is off the air.
It was Tim Priester. Right.
Oh.
So again, everybody knows I have a great deal of respect for Tim.
Me too.
And so the question was kind of like not like a pro Kane Madden comment, but like Tim seems to have watched the film and thought that Kane played well. And so I don't know what I'm missing. And this isn't a comment about Tim. Mike, the question was fine. I mean, your job's not to go up there and just crush every kid that you're talking to. The question was fine. It was kind of a favorable Kane Madden question, but then Brian Kelly was like, "Oh, he's playing really well. He's more comfortable. He
said he's been playing freer, faster, and more physical, possibly because of the early expectations.
He has been playing more physical. Wasn't playing well. I will say that Kane has been playing more physical. He has, but the freer and the other part,
he's real free because he hardly hits anybody.
See, I'm gonna push back on that. I think that's an hyperbolic statement that to me, look, I could point to you 7 or 8 plays on Saturday night where Kane Madden came off and hit somebody hard and got movement. I can.
Okay.
It's just that.
Out of how many?
So to say he never hits anybody, I think.
Okay. Well, never is a strong word.
But I think that's an unfair statement, and we have to be careful about that because we are.
That's fine. But I guarantee you, I could find twice as many plays where he hit nobody.
I get, and we talked about that last night. I'm not arguing with you about that, but I do think we need to be careful that we don't become like just the Kane Madden haters, right? So when you make a comment like he doesn't hit anybody, he needs to get credit for the fact that he does play physical when he hits people. But just because you're playing physical doesn't mean you're playing well. I don't think he's playing freer. I think that part of the comment was confusing to me because I think he looks uncertain of what he's doing. Like you talked about the pass pro where he just kind of stares outside as there's no one to block and someone's running inside of him, like Jarrett Patterson needed that help. That doesn't look like someone who's playing free. That looks like someone who doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he
looks lost.
Looks lost. Yeah,
he looks lost.
So I didn't understand that. And so I mean, if honestly, if there's someone that I love this comment. This is awesome. This is great, Searcher Green. This is awesome comment. He is so good. The D-line runs away from him, so he has no one to block. I mean, maybe that's it.
Yeah, maybe
that's it. I mean, he's obviously being sarcastic, I think, there. But that confused me a little bit. So I'm actually, because of who asked the question, I'm actually going to go watch the game again later tonight and just try to have an open, objective mind about how.
Okay, I'm interested to see what you come up with. I really am. I really am.
Right, because like I said, I do respect Tim.
I do too. I do too.
Tim doesn't ask those kind of questions if he doesn't think that that's what he believes. So I'm going to watch it again, and I'm going to try as best I can to kind of keep an open mind. But I've watched it 3 times now, and I don't see it. I see about 5 or 6 plays where I thought like you said, Vince, when he can just come off and down block inside, boy, he can push people.
Exactly.
He can.
Exactly. I
but
agree
not
with
many
that.
teams allow you to do that. And that's where I thought USC's game plan was flawed. You know, Coach Kelly talked about how because they came out and they did so many different things that but see, USC didn't attack out of that. That's what was so confusing. Like USC line up in a 3-man front and they didn't attack at all. They had a very passive game plan. And I thought the fact that they were able to throw the ball as well as they did because against a passive, when I say passive, I'm not saying it in a critical manner. I mean, it's more like hey, we're going to drop and we're going to try to take away your pass game. We're going to try to force you to beat us with the run. And Notre Dame stuck with that. I mean, Notre Dame could have done some things where they put multiple guys, tight ends on the field today. They're going 3 down, 3-3-5. Let's hammer them. But Tommy Rees stuck with the pass game and did some mixed up his concepts. He mixed up the horizontal and vertical concepts, ran some screens, because there's two ways a screen can work. One is a team is too aggressive and you throw the screen behind them. The other way is teams are too passive. You get the screen out and then you get some lead blockers out there. I thought he did a great job of that, but it was one of those things where they didn't really attack. Most teams are going to attack more than what we saw from USC. I didn't understand that part of their game plan. But the whole thing was just a little bit of a confusing thing for me. I'll be honest with you. It was confusing. Anything else from the press conference, Vince, that you want to chat about? I know there's one thing that you read.
I want to go back and listen
here because I missed like 5 minutes of it, and he talked about that. And
I want to go back and listen to the context before I say anything, because I don't want people to take it the wrong way. So
we'll make sure we don't take it the wrong way.
Exactly. So I want to go back and listen, but maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow, depending on if it's what I think it is.
Maybe we'll start off with right. We'll start off of that before we go.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's a big week, Vince, and obviously we're going to have a lot to talk about this week when it comes to breaking down this team. We're going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to this matchup. This is a huge matchup. To me, this is one of two teams left in the schedule that can beat Notre Dame. If not, like every team, even Navy, can beat Notre Dame if Notre Dame goes out there and turns it over 5 times. Right?
Sure.
Stanford can beat Notre Dame if Notre Dame doesn't play their game. Right?
Yeah,
there's every team on the schedule can beat Notre Dame if Notre Dame doesn't show up and that team plays out of their mind, like Georgia Tech. If Georgia Tech and North Carolina played again a week after Georgia Tech stomped them, North Carolina probably does the same thing to them in return. It's what I love about college football. If Kansas and Oklahoma had a rematch this weekend, Kansas would win by at least 50.
That's exactly right.
But that's what I love about college football. So this is one of the 2 games left where that team is at least dangerous enough to where it's not going to take a lot of Notre Dame mistakes for them to potentially beat Notre Dame.
Right.
And yes, Saturday was good, but Saturday wasn't like, oh, they've arrived. They still only scored 31 points against a team that doesn't have a great defense. I like a lot of things I saw. There's things that got to get cleaned up. But if you don't clean those things up against North Carolina, it makes it a little bit dangerous. And last year, the other thing too is when you lost Kyle Hamilton last year, you still had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Yeah, good point.
You don't have him this year. So I think that's kind of and Patrick Barnes makes a great point. Yes, absolutely, Patrick. I mean, I still believe this. If Notre Dame and Cincinnati played a week later, Notre Dame wins by 10 because they don't. I mean, think about how many dumb, bad, game-changing mistakes Notre Dame made in that game. Turning receivers loose, fumbling kickoffs, an interception from your freshman quarterback. They returned deep into territory. You gave them 10 points, and yet still Notre Dame is a stop away from getting the ball back. Actually, they did get the ball back once, down 17-13 with a chance to take the lead, and then you made more mistakes, and then they go down and score.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean,
you're not going to convince me otherwise.
That's what I love about it.
Yeah,
that's what I love about it. And so that's what I love about this game. But North Carolina and Virginia are the 2 teams right now that have me most concerned because they have really, really good college quarterbacks. Like really, Brennan Armstrong is as dynamic right now in the passing game as there is in the country. And he's spreading. I mean, it's not like he's got like Randy Moss to throw to, right? He's got 5-6 guys. He's just going to spread the ball around. Sam Howell does a great job of spreading the ball around. These are 2 really good football teams. Now, good football teams from the standpoint of their quality. They're not great. They're not teams that are going to go be playing in New Year's Six Bowls. They're quality teams that if you don't bring it, they can beat you. And so we're going to spend the rest of the week breaking that game down. But today, Vince, before we do that, I really want to talk about college football.
Yes.
Because, man, this has been such a fun season. And this Saturday was just another example. I had so much football to watch the last 2 games because we didn't have – so I brought a monitor and my computer to the tailgate on Saturday. But we couldn't get the internet was – I mean, I couldn't even pull up ESPN on my phone to see scores.
Yeah.
It was really bad. So I watched some games last night, and it was another wild weekend of college football. I want to start with the Clemson-Pitt game.
Oh, okay.
That was – so I predicted 27-16. The final was 27-17. I watched it, and it was even worse for Clemson than it Pitt should have beat them by even more.
That's so sad.
I mean, Pitt missed some opportunities. The Clemson defense actually still played pretty well. one of Pitt's touchdowns was they try to shovel pass like on the first series of the second half, and DJ threw it right to a defensive lineman. Guy made a great play, picks it and runs it back for a touchdown. They are hurting, and to me, the reason I want to start with that, Clemson is this is what happens to you, Notre Dame, if you don't think more outside the box with your offense. They got obsessed with highly ranked, big, tall receivers to where now they got Dabo's kid and some walk-on I never heard of as the slot guys now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just not difference makers. They're not Amari Rodgers. They're not Ray McLeod. They're not Davis Scott, right? And their offense is not the same. They don't have backs that can make plays out of the backfield. And what we said before is that Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne masked a lot, and mainly Trevor. That's where I was wrong. They missed Travis Etienne every bit as much as they missed Trevor Lawrence because they don't have anyone that can make plays after the ball. Now, they've got these big, tall receivers, but they don't have anybody that can line up and do the other things. And their offensive line is not coached well. And that combination of no playmakers with the ball and a bad line has made a 5-star quarterback look benchable. And it's in his head. And that's my fear with when I look at Notre Dame's recruiting, that they got to make sure that they don't go down that same path of big, tall, long receivers that all do the same exact thing. And CJ Williams is going to be your slot guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're a warning for Notre Dame. But man, how does Tony Elliott go from the golden child to people want him fired? I mean, think about it. Clemson has been in the college football playoff
almost every year.
15, 16, 17, 18, 6 years in a row.
Yeah.
First year out, and people want to fire their offense coordinator. And honestly, I understand it. And this is what we said this summer. Ever since Jeff Scott and Tony Elliott split up, not split up like in a bad, but Jeff Scott got a head coaching job in South Florida, neither of them have been very good.
Yeah.
Like, as a team, those two guys were tremendous. Individually, they haven't been. And this is why we kept saying Trevor Lawrence masked a lot of problems at Clemson. But Pitt was clearly, for 60 minutes, the best team on that field on Saturday, Vince. I was shocked by what I saw.
And as I look at the box score, and this has absolutely nothing to do with the play on the field, where does Clemson get these quarterbacks whose names I can't pronounce? Do you know how to pronounce the other guy that was in?
It's actually not that hard from when I listened to it, and assuming that they're
saying it right.
Saying it right, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of letters. Famicon, maybe?
Yeah, no, it's not that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd have to go back and listen to it again, but when they said it on TV, it sounded a lot easier than what it looks like.
What it looks like?
And I'd have to go look at it again. But, I mean, their quarterback situation is a mess, though, and it
also
is a huge shows
mess.
why you have to recruit good quarterbacks year after year after year.
I mean, the fact that DJ Uiagalelei is only a 5.1 yard average on his complete.
Yeah.
I mean,
he does not look anything like the kid he was last year. I mean, he looks tentative. He threw very few spirals, and part of it is in his defense. It's like you're afraid he's feeling the rush because not only is their line bad, but they've had some injuries up front. They had another one on Saturday. Mac Bockhorst, Notre Dame fans remember him. He's from St. X in Cincinnati. Notre Dame recruited him, and he got hurt again. He's had a very injury-prone career, which feels back. He's a really good kid, and when he's been healthy, he's been a solid player. But also, like Will Shipley, I thought ran the ball, was really going to kick returns, but they ran a play where they emptied out the backfield. It was a great play call. And you had 2 receivers to the left, 3 to the right. Will Shipley motions out to number 3. He runs a backside seam, and he's got the guy beat by like 5-6 yards, Vince. And DJ puts the ball like right here. Like, you know, he's running this way, and it just bounces off his chest. And it should have been a touchdown. And it's like, okay, you can get mad at the play caller all you want, and you can get mad at the quarterback all you want, but what are you supposed to do right there?
Right. Exactly.
And I think it was a 7-7 game at that time. Clemson, I think, would have taken a lead at that time. I mean, and DJ is shook. I mean, you watch him; he is shook. His throwing motion looks poor. You know, there's just a lot of things that you look at him and say he doesn't look right, and it's here.
Absolutely, 100%.
Because
we know that he can do it.
Here, it's a confidence thing.
Yeah.
It's not a heart thing. It's not an intelligence thing. He doesn't have confidence in himself. He doesn't have confidence in the guys around him. And honestly, having watched Clemson several weeks in a row now, I can't blame him.
Yeah.
I can't blame him.
Well, it's because they're not making any kind of adjustments for the personnel that they now have. I mean,
they're still trying to run him.
Right. Exactly. Right.
I mean, it was bad, but I feel bad for that defense because that's a real good defense. But the area where they have the position that you and I have talked about that is the issue. Their safety recruiting and play is not good. They still got Nolan Turner. He's like a 9th-year senior. I think he's the only kid in America that's going to play more career games than Hunter Renfrow. Right? But he's back for like a 6th year because of COVID. And I'm like, didn't that guy play on their like 15 team that played Bama? But I mean, he's just not a good football player. I mean, we saw what happened last year when he plays against the elite athletes at Ohio State. We saw what happens when he got in space against Kyron Williams. We saw what happened when he couldn't help against Javon McKinley and guys like that. But we saw what Avery Davis did to their safeties last year too.
Mm-hmm.
That's a position where they're struggling big time. But their front seven, even with some injuries, is really good. But it doesn't matter because their safeties are bad, but their offense just kept giving Pitt time. And Kenny Pickett is really, really good. This is my first time watching him for a full game.
Yeah, I mean, he has really taken his game to another level. And I feel like he's been at Pitt for a long time, too.
He was the starting quarterback for Pitt the week after they beat Miami, which came the week after Miami beat Notre Dame in 2017.
So there you go.
Yeah. He's been there for a minute.
It's 5 seasons, dude. Like 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Like that's 5 years that he's been around. But
and he's played every year. That's the thing that's what makes it so it's not. I mean, a lot of guys are around for 5 years, but they're not around as guys.
But he's been the starter, I think, for 5 years.
He started late that year. He didn't start that whole season. He started late in the year. He led them to that win against Miami. But yeah, and I love this comment by Chief Brody. Kenny Pickett is good, but he has the worst QB name of all time. Yes, you do not want a quarterback named Pickett. No, you don't. That is a great.
I just got that.
Great
point.
That's
hilarious. Because all I could think was like a picket fence. I'm like, who cares?
Pick it. Yeah, there you go. Come on, Vince, get with it.
Telling you, man, it's a lot going on here. Yeah. So can we talk about the Penn State Illinois game real quick?
Do you want to talk about the game or the overtime?
I want to talk about the overtime.
Okay.
I didn't watch a lot of the game. I watched from the third overtime on, and for a minute, it didn't register to me what the heck was like. Why do they keep running 2-point conversion plays? Because when they changed the rule, I was under the complete impression when they said that you have to go for 2, that meant if you scored a touchdown, you now have to go for 2. The field goals were still in play. You were still going to start from the 25-yard line, like all of that. But now you had to go for 2 because that's how it used to be with the overtime rule. Once you got to so many, you had to go for 2 in hopes that it would end at some point. I despise the new overtime rule. Despise the overtime rule.
Hate it.
Why in good gracious, why are they running 7 2-point conversion plays in a row? It's so dumb. Why? How is the game being decided by a bunch of 3-yard plays over and over and over and over? I did not like that at all, and I'm shocked that I didn't understand that was what the rule was.
Yeah, I didn't either. I mean, and I read it, as it is, but it didn't register in my head. That's what they were doing. It was
so stupid.
Look, if you don't want long overtimes, I'll say again, it's not that complicated. Put the ball at the 40. Make it to where you have to pick up at least one first down to really be in field goal range. If you don't want the games to go on forever and it's real football, I don't know.
After a while, they just started running it between the tackles because look.
Well, Penn State, one of the ones Penn State scored on, and they didn't score on what they only scored on one, was just an inside run, just a draw.
Right.
That's not good football.
You only practice so many 2-point plays, first of all.
Yeah.
Okay. During the week. What, 2, maybe 3, but not 9. You're basically just calling your offense on, okay, what are we doing on 2nd and short? Or what's our game plan on 3rd and 3? Like that's the column you're pulling from, after a while. And I did not like it at all. The fact that it was 9 overtimes. No, you just ran 9 plays. Like that doesn't. I don't know. I don't like it at all.
I also feel like this is another example of why I've said for a long time James Franklin is one of the most overrated coaches in college football.
Yeah.
Like his team, they have so much more talent than Illinois, and he's just not a good game day coach. He just doesn't make good in-game decisions. The only time his team has ever really looked good in games was when he had Joe Moorhead running the offense. And I think at the time, I have to look this up, but he had Bob Shoop running his defense, I believe. I'm going to go look that up. But I like Bob Shoop as a defensive coordinator. So no, that was Brent Price first season. So that would have been after, I believe, Bob Shoop was running the defense. So I look at this team and I say, you can't run the ball against Illinois. I ran for 62 yards against Illinois, and Illinois ran all over you. Illinois ran for 357 yards.
Wow. Illinois.
Yes. And listen to this. Penn State lost at home to a non-option team that went 8 of 21 for 38 yards passing. Beat Penn State at Penn State. Like, that's such a bad loss for Penn State. Like, that is a real – and what I'm curious about is how do they respond to this? Because they got Ohio State this weekend. They've lost 2 in a row now.
So in other words, I mean, that's like the ultimate trap game, right? It's the game before Ohio State. I get it, but still, you got to put away Illinois.
Yeah. Illinois.
Come on. Illinois.
And there's a lot of people that love Phil Troutwine, the offensive line coach at Penn State. I don't know a lot about him other than he played at Florida. I've heard good things about him, but Penn State has not been able to run the ball all year. I mean, their rushing numbers this year, they've gone for 50, 90, 80, 62, 107, and then they have these 2 weird games, 209 against Indiana and 240 against Ball State. But like they've gone, it's just real strange. Now again, Notre Dame doesn't exactly have a great running team either, but that's kind of my point. I don't want to replace Jeff Quinn, which is what people talk about, with a guy who can't, because he can't run the ball effectively. And like, it was funny. I had a couple people say like, where's all the Jeff Quinn haters now? I'm like, oh, we're still here.
No, we're still
not
here.
Haters. Like, I like Jeff Quinn, but it's coaching job. I'm like, look, when you're trying to come at me with 170 rushing yards at 4.15 yards per carry in one game, and then 180 the previous game at 4.19 yards per carry, as if like a "see, you were wrong" moment, you're not proving the point you think you are.
Yeah,
in fact,
exactly.
The opposite. If that's what you're pumping to, is like they've arrived. But Penn State's been worse. I mean, in some instances, running the ball. I mean, it's because it's pretty bad. Because
they ran the ball for 2.1 yards a carry against Illinois.
Yeah, so like Notre Dame's averaging 2.99 yards per rush. Penn State is averaging 3.5 yards per rush. But the difference is, however, Notre Dame's given up twice as many sacks. And I think that to me is a little bit of a difference to me. If you actually look at the numbers of their top rushers, so like the top 4 rushers for Penn State are at 3.1, 5.1, 3.1, and 4.1. Notre Dame's 4.2, 6.1, 3.2, 3.6. So pretty similar. And I would say that Notre Dame is trending in the right direction, because Kyron Williams has had 2 good games in a row where he's ran the ball well. Went for 4.3 against Virginia Tech and 5.5 against USC. So certainly going in the right direction. But yeah, Penn State's a mess. And their schedule, Vince, that I'm really curious to see what Penn State does down the stretch, because they have Ohio State this week. The way Ohio State's playing right now, that game's might not even be close.
No, I don't think it will be.
Then you look at it, they play at Maryland, which the way they're playing right now, if you couldn't beat Illinois at home, Maryland's not a gimme, and they're not good. And then you've got Michigan at home, and then Rutgers at home, which will be a win, and then you're at Michigan State.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, there's a lot of potential L's left on. I mean, they were 5-0 and ranked on the top. This is why I say I don't care about what people say. Well, Notre Dame beat the top 10 team in this year, and I'm like, when was that game played? September what? Okay, thank you. Right? What were they ranked in the year? Penn State got all the way up to, I think, number 4.
Yeah.
And they've now lost 2 games in a row to Iowa and Indiana.
Right.
And I was willing to give them an asterisk for the Iowa game because their quarterback got hurt and they were up 17-3. But they're going to lose to Ohio State, which I think is going to knock them completely out of the top 25.
Yeah, because they're 20 now.
Right.
They're 20. Yeah.
And Ohio State, look, Ryan Day is a smart guy. He smells blood. He knows that Penn State's doing really well on the recruiting trail. We're going to try to embarrass you.
Mm-hmm.
And then at Maryland, home against Michigan, and at Michigan State left on the schedule. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. Very, very interesting. And a lot of other games this weekend, Vince, that were entertaining and very interesting to me. App State upsetting a Coastal Carolina. I enjoyed that one thoroughly. The Oklahoma-Kansas game, that fourth down play by Caleb Williams, talking about just like having just an awareness of a true freshman with game situation awareness on that fourth down.
Yeah, that's like as a coach, like, what are you doing?
Right.
Yes, great job.
Right. Like, I mean, he sees his running back going backwards on fourth down. Now, we could debate whether the whistle should have blown or whatever else.
I didn't think so. I think it was a good no whistle there.
Well, I mean, some people thought it should have been blown.
Okay.
Right? But all I'm saying is, I understand we can have that debate, but put that aside because the call was what it was. Just the awareness, however, by that quarterback to even try something like that was impressive to me. Really, really impressive to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, honestly, it felt to me like a freshman play. Like that's something like maybe he did in high school or something. You know what I mean? Like that's what it felt like to me. But you're right. It was when you really think about it, he knew what the situation was. He understood what needed to happen, and he tried to make something happen. Like I give him credit for it.
Right. But that
they went down and scored on that too.
That takes some real heads up stuff.
Yeah.
So here's something that's coming down the pike, Vince. It's Brett McMurphy and Pete Thamel are both reporting that Texas Tech head coach Matt Wells is about to get fired.
Okay.
Texas Tech is 5-3.
Whoa.
They just lost to Kansas State by a point. They lost to TCU in Texas. They also have a road win over West Virginia, and they beat Kansas, and they beat Houston. They're 5-3. He's in his third year, I believe.
Wow.
There's got to be there's got to be some reason for it.
Yeah, there's got to be more to it than that.
Yeah, because no one's saying I'm not reseating here. Has anybody in the chat? Have any of you heard why? Was there something that this has to be something happened. This has to be like a Washington State situation, not vaccine related. But they didn't fire Nick Rolovich for football related reasons. They had won like 4 games in a row. They just had beaten Stanford. It was for something else. There has to be more to this than that. And then Joseph Salvatore made a comment. He said, hopefully Penn State does poorly down the stretch and we can snag Singleton. If I'm Notre Dame's coaching staff, especially on offense, there are 4 guys that I am going to be calling like now.
I know who they are. Or I know 2 of them, I think.
Drew Aller.
Yep.
Nicholas
that was 1.
Singleton.
Yeah, that was 2.
Drew Shelton, the offensive lineman, and Caden Saunders, the wide receiver from Ohio. I am on the phone with all of them. Hey, look, man, look what we're doing. Penn State just got curb stomped by Ohio State. You know what I mean? Like your head coach is talking about USC. But how phenomenal would it be if USC hired James Franklin after he just pisses away the 2021 season?
It'd be typical USC.
This is why I say don't get caught up on who's going to be the next head coach at a place 6 games into the season. Let's see how the season plays out before we start talking about this. But I don't know. I'm really curious about why you would fire a coach that is 5-3, and I believe it's his 3rd year, right? And it's not like they went out and got embarrassed this weekend by Kansas State. They lost by a point. There has to be something more to this than just that, right? He's in his 3rd year. He went 4-8 and 4-6. Last year they went 4-6. They were competitive 4-6. You know, when you look at COVID and everything, they lost by Tech. They lost to Texas in overtime. They lost 6 points. They lost by 6 at number 23 Oklahoma State. So there has to be something more to this.
Agreed.
There has to be something more than this. So
But
Yeah,
tool worker saying he didn't get along with the AD.
There's a lot of ADs. There's a lot of bad ADs in the country right now. I mean, I don't care if you don't get along or not. You're 5-3. You don't fire a guy in the middle of the season because you don't like him.
Yeah, agreed.
Unless he did something right now. Again, it could be a situation where, like, the AD came in and said you're going to do this, and he said "F you," and I'm not doing that. Right?
And
AD may have come in and said you need to fire your offensive coordinator or your defensive. It wouldn't be that, because what I read is Sonny Cumbie, the OC, is going to become the interim head coach. Maybe he said, "Hey, you need to do this, you need to do that." And he said, "No, I'm not doing it." Well, I mean, I still don't think you should fire him right in the middle of the season. But I mean, you defy your boss. That's
Yeah, exactly.
If Brian Kelly walked into Tommy Reese's office and said, "Hey, I want you to start this guy, this guy, and this guy," and Brian Kelly said, "No, I'm not doing it," well, that's cause. I'm your boss. I'm telling you to do this. You're not doing it. That's cause. I mean,
exactly.
You got to go. Maybe there's something like that, but it's not. It can't be about their what they're doing on the field. Can't be.
Gotcha. Well, Brian, it's about that time for me.
Yeah.
I think you're probably going to keep going a little bit. Yes,
I'm going to go try and answer some questions and just
cool.
Kind of get some people's thoughts on some things before I get going here.
Awesome.
We're not going to be here too much longer, but
awesome. Well, everybody, I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their Monday. I'll be back tomorrow for the stacking up, and I will talk to you later. Enjoy Brian the rest of the way.
Tommy Guns has a we'll talk into this here, but Tommy talks about what's his background, potentially hireable. He was the head coach at Utah State for a couple years. Matt Wells did well there. Went 9-5, 10-4, 6-7, 3-9, 6-7. Then went 10-2 in 2018 with Jordan Love at quarterback. Before that, he was the offensive coordinator at Utah State for 2012. Was at New Mexico, Louisville, places like that. I don't know enough about him to say it's based off of what his background is. And Matt is saying this. CBS Sports and one other news outlet in Texas are saying performance. Who knows? It's not performance. The AD may say performance, but you don't fire your coach at Texas Tech for being 5-3 for performance. I'm sorry, you just don't. You may say that, but that wouldn't be the reason why. So I'm gonna go back up here to the top, see if we have any questions or comments that would be fun to get in here before we get out of here. Matt D says, I think Brian Kelly is out of touch with the media at times. Does he not realize that the media can research Jack Cohn's playing career and his playing style? I think he realizes there's a lot of people in the media that won't. I mean, that's the problem, is there are people in the media at somewhat prominent places that if Brian Kelly says what he said about Jack Cohn today, they will just write it with no thought whatsoever. And and the other thing too is it's not that he's out of touch. He made it very clear last week. He doesn't care. He does not care what we think or what we write. He's gonna say, hey, look, I'm gonna use the people that I can use, and I'm gonna dismiss the people that are critical, and I'm gonna just do it my way. I mean, he's literally acting like nobody out there has been calling for them to change their offense. I mean, that's how he's acting, which is kind of nuts. John DeCrisio says, I think Buckner should have gone in after Bo intercepted the ball and ran it to the 4-yard line. More options for running and passing those circumstances. What do you think? Yes, I do agree with that, John. I think if you're going to get in the red zone, like in the 10-yard line, and you're going to go 13 personnel, 100% you put Tyler Buckner in the game. Tyler Buckner in the game, because as you said, look, you're not really throwing the ball out of that. And Jack's not really a guy I'm worried about running the football there. I would have put Tyler in the game. Yes, I think you're spot on. That's exactly what I would have done. Here's a good question from Tool Worker I saw earlier I wanted to get to. It says, and what does a great second half of the season mean? Where does the team end up at the end of the year? I think for me, that a great second half of the season isn't just winning out. I mean, the reality is Notre Dame should beat every team that they play. It means, to me, finishing strong. So like in 2019, Notre Dame finished really strong. Now, they played a bunch of bad teams, but for the most part, they did things that end of that season that put them in position to blow those teams out. I would like to see that again this year. I think for the most part, as I've said, you need to convincingly beat 4 of your final 6 opponents. I would consider, Vince is still at the bottom, he's not in the chat, but I would consider the USC game a convincing win. It wasn't a blowout, but it was a convincing win. They were never really threatened USC kind of got it within 8 late, but I never felt like, even when they scored to make it 24-16, I never felt like, oh, gee, USC might win this game. I never really felt like that. It was a convincing win. I think they need to have at least 2 or 3 blowouts, and it left, and they just need to play well, right? Like it's about, the line progressing, not just beating up on teams that stink on defense, but, be fundamentally sound, be physical, because you can watch a team and you can say, hey, they won that game because they just had better players, as opposed to they played the game well. And there's a difference. To me, if you see improvement, so Kevin Austin goes out there and makes some plays against bad corners that he didn't make against USC, but he played it the same way. So let's say instead of, making a better play for the ball, he just still kind of catches it lamely on a back shoulder against a non-Chris Steele. That's not going to impress me. It may be 35, 40-yard game, but it's not going to impress me because I'm going to know against a good team, this isn't going to work. And so it's about the offensive line being fundamentally sound. And then it's also about saying, hey, and this is what we talked about against USC. I truly believe Notre Dame could have come out in 12 and 13 personnel at times, more so 12, and just run the ball for over 200 yards against USC. I do. I think USC sucks on defense. Their run defense is bad. But what Notre Dame did is they said, hey, look, this is who we are. We're going to play to our perceived strengths, which is quick passing game, taking shots outside, and then using the pass game to support the run game. That, to me, even though they didn't run as much as they could have if they committed to the run, it was a better performance because it's building for future success. So I think, to me, to a worker, that's what I look at and say, hey, look, it's not just about the defense making stops, the offense scoring points and winning games. It's about, are you winning games to a level to where you are playing to your potential? And this is something I think Nick Saban has been masterful at. When you talk about the process, Nick Saban always talks about the process. And the process is what that means is, yes, winning and losing matters. But winning isn't the only goal. It's about how do you win? Because Nick Saban has always understood all but maybe 1 or 2 teams on his schedule, they can just beat by showing up for the most part. And just kind of playing okay, playing good football. They're going to beat 10 of the 12 teams on their schedule. But it's about playing well within those games to say, hey, we are getting to the point where we're close to maximizing our potential as a football team. So you look at Notre Dame and say, well, look, they're 6-1, right? They beat all these teams, but they shouldn't have beat Florida State by 3. They shouldn't have beat Toledo by 3. They shouldn't have beat other teams by 3. And everybody has that game every now and then, but Notre Dame was kind of having it every week where they were just out talenting people. They weren't out coaching people, things like that. So to me, that's what I'm looking for, is where you feel like, boy, this team, they're getting the most out of this talent. And sometimes that's going to be a 10-point win. Sometimes that's going to be a 40-point win. But whatever the case may be, it's about evaluating the process much more so than the result, meaning the result can't just be about winning. It's about winning in a way that you're moving forward as a program. That's how I look at it. So very, very, very good question. Get through a couple more here. And I popped this up earlier, but this is great from Nate Wallace. My response to Brian Kelly's new offensive strategy: don't threaten me with a good time. I really like that. Really like that. That was good. Corey D says, I'm delighted at the progress improvement of the offensive line. That said, does Kelly decide not to make coaching changes as a result? I think we need to let the season play out, but this has kind of been my concern. And we talked about this last week. You cannot play well and still beat up the teams that are left on your schedule for the most part. And that's the concern for me when I look at this team. Is we said this last week. There's nothing but bad defenses left on the schedule. Nothing but bad defenses. And you could beat them up and not play great. And we kind of saw that on Saturday. Ran for 170 yards, but didn't necessarily play great. Played okay, better, but not where you need to be yet. So that's a concern. Anthony L with a $10 super chat. Thank you very, very much for that, Anthony. And he says, if Georgia beats Bama, whether they deserve it, Notre Dame has a chance to be in the top 4 if they run the table impressively. 1, Georgia. 2, Big Ten champ. 3, Cincinnati. 4, Oklahoma. 5, Notre Dame. If OU stumbles, And I think, Anthony, there was a rest to your comment when you bring that up. I think it was going to be if OU stumbles, Notre Dame could be in there, and he's absolutely right. Whether you like it or not, whether you think Notre Dame's deserving or not, I think the problem. So, like, I'm not necessarily looking to have the playoff conversation because Notre Dame's got a long way to go. There's a lot they need to improve upon, in my opinion. What I will say, however, is it doesn't mean that that in the context that they're not a playoff caliber team, because they are. And what I mean by that is you can say, well, Notre Dame's not a playoff caliber team. Okay, well, who is? Name me 5, 6 teams that are clearly better than what Notre Dame has been this year. And I don't think you can. I think where I would disagree with Anthony is I think more would have to happen than just that, because, the Big Ten champ, you talk about Ohio State, but Oregon's still a one-loss team with a win over Ohio State. So let's say Ohio State goes out and runs the table, which right now it's looking like they're going to do. Of course, they could stub their toe. But let's say that they go out and do that. I'd still say Oregon should be ranked ahead of Notre Dame, because Oregon's going to have a win. Again, assuming they're 12-1, for 2 reasons. Number one, Oregon's going to have a better win than anything Notre Dame has by a mile. Number 2, I think their loss, and people say, well, they have a better loss. I don't care about better losses. And I don't think the committee cares about better losses unless things are really, really close. And I don't think things are close with Notre Dame, because the bigger win is far more important than the bigger loss. And they're going to have some wins over a team or two that are going to be up ranked, where Notre Dame could end up going 11-1 and not beat a single team that finishes in the top 25. That's very possible. And I would imagine at this point in time is pretty likely, especially with Purdue losing this weekend. So to me, Oregon, if they win out, also gets credit, because I think their loss is going to have an asterisk. And what I mean by that is the committee looks at circumstances of losses. Is your quarterback out? And I think Joe Moorhead getting sick and needing an emergency surgery and missing the Stanford game, a game that they lost on the road in overtime, they're going to look at that and say, I think Oregon probably wins that if they don't have this circumstance that doesn't define who they've been the other 12 games, right? So I think that Oregon would be ahead of them. And I also think that the Big Ten champ situation is going to be interesting too. And here's what I mean by that. Let's just say hypothetically that Michigan State goes 11-1. Okay. And they play, I'm trying to find the schedule here. They play Ohio State and Michigan State play November 20th. So second to last game of the year. It's at Ohio State. Let's just say hypothetically that Michigan State beats Michigan, which is going to give them a very good win, beats Penn State. They've got some good wins on their schedule this year, right? I would argue more good wins than what Notre Dame is going to have. They have a chance to play at Purdue, so you'd have that comparable, that win of, similar opponent. And let's say they lose to Ohio State in a close game. I think you could make a case that a second Big Ten team would then deserve it over Notre Dame, if we're being honest. Because the problem with Notre Dame is their resume is just not going to be impressive. They're not going to have beaten anybody. And you have to be fair and objective when you look at that. Now, could Notre Dame be a playoff caliber team by the season's end? I still believe they can be. Have they shown themselves to be a playoff caliber team through 7 games? No, absolutely not. Does that mean that they won't be a playoff team by the next 5 games if they continue to progress the way that I think they can progress? Of course they can. I need to see that first, though, for me. But I also say, Anthony, that to your point, I love this discussion. A lot more would have to happen than just Georgia beating Bama. I think a lot more would have to happen. I think you need the Big Ten to kind of eat itself to where there is no one loss in second team. So you could also use Michigan as an example. Let's say Michigan runs a table, loses to Ohio State in the last game of the season by a field goal. Michigan's going to have a better resume than Notre Dame. I hate to say it, but they will. They'll have a better resume than Notre Dame. So I think you need Michigan and Michigan State or Ohio State. I mean, if Michigan or Michigan State beats Ohio State and Ohio State's out, that's 2 losses. They're out. So I think a lot would have to happen, in my opinion. So I and it's not because, like Tool Worker says, this is the year that that's in playing a conference championship game will kill Notre Dame in the polls regarding the Final Four. I guess I'm trying to that it's in playing a. I don't understand what you're saying there, but I don't think Notre Dame not being in a conference is going to hurt them if that is in fact what you're saying. I think if anything, conference championship games are going to be a lot more chaotic this year. Potentially could be a lot more chaotic this year, which then could open up an opportunity for Notre Dame because the ACC is going to be out. They're just going to be out. The ACC is not going to have a playoff team, in my opinion. And so I get what your comment here. We don't look like a playoff team. I'd be happier with a New Year's Six bowl win than a beat down versus Georgia. Could you imagine what Georgia defense would do to the current state of the offense? But again, that's the point. Look, this is what I'm saying, and this is what other people are saying. It's not about what Notre Dame is now. Right now, Notre Dame's not a playoff team. They don't deserve to be in the playoff. I don't even have them in the conversation right now based on what they've done. What I am saying, however, is that if you want me to accept the fact that right now Notre Dame is not a playoff team, which I will, you have to also accept the fact that this is a down year. There are no great teams. Georgia's the best team this year, but Georgia's not on the level of past champions or even runners-up. This is a team. This is a Notre Dame team that if they play to their potential and get better week after week after week after week, by the end of the season, I think we could be having a conversation about Notre Dame playing as one of the 4 best teams in the country. I don't see it. I don't think they're going to make that much progress. I don't think they're going to maximize their potential as a team. I think they're a long way away from that, really, on both sides of the ball, but especially on offense. But I don't think it's something that should just be dismissed outright. I don't really care to engage in it beyond people asking questions. Like, I'm not going to be writing an article this week of why Notre Dame's a playoff contender. No, they're not right now. They got to play a lot better. But I think we at least need to be open to the idea that if this team finishes strong, and strong meaning not just going 5-0 down the stretch, but 5-0 in blasting people, that we can at least have that conversation. But they got to do that first before I'm really willing to dive too deep into that conversation. Omar Austin, I haven't seen you in a while, Omar. Good to see you back in the chat. I noticed the exact same thing you guys did. Madden didn't touch anybody several times. I just wanted to pull that up, not because I wanted to take a shot at Kane Madden again, but we just haven't seen any comments from Omar in a while, so I wanted to get that out there. All right, Blaine Tiller says, not being sarcastic, was the USC game this year the first successful jet sweep by Lindsey? I think it was the first time they've ran a jet sweep to Lindsey. They might have run one other one, but I don't think they've even run it with him. I know they ran one with Avery Davis against Cincinnati, I believe, for like 8 yards, which is successful. I mean, it's a run play. You get 8 yards in a run play, that's successful. But I don't remember maybe but one other time they even ran a jet sweep to Brady Lindsey. All right, let's get down here. Jojo Pineda asks about recruiting news. I got some stuff from Coach D from the board. Any recruiting news? First of all, Vince isn't going to have recruiting news. That's just not what he does. And any recruiting news he's going to have is going to come from me. So everything on the board is what I have so far on the message board. So I did put up some recruiting scoop last night about the 2022 class. Okay, let's get down here to a few more questions here. Demetrius Shrek said, Kelly did say, I wish I was smarter earlier in the USC postgame PC. I enjoyed him expressing humility there. Number one, I did not hear him say that. Number two, if I know Brian Kelly at all, I would be willing to bet you that was a little bit of sarcasm or a shot as opposed to him being humble. That does not sound – I'm going to have to go back and look at that, Demetrius, because that doesn't sound like something that Brian Kelly would say and be serious about it. He would not give any other people the pleasure. Joel Easton expressing my sentiments. Please go to USC, James Franklin. Yes, agree. Nate Wallace, I agree with this. And here's why I believe this. People have said that I'm wrong on this, and it's fair. I get it. Said James Franklin as the next USC head coach actually sounds like a good thing for Notre Dame. And here's why I say it is a good thing, because I think he would do a lot at USC like he's done at Penn State. They'd be really have some good teams, 10, 11 win teams, 9 win teams. And he'd recruit well because he's a good recruiter. He's a good salesman. And so they'd be good enough. It'd be kind of like how they were in the late 80s and early 90s, where they're good enough to when you beat them, it's a big win, but they're not good enough to actually be able to beat you when you're a good team. That's kind of how I feel about James Franklin at USC. I think it would be good for Notre Dame. And say, well, he'd beat Notre Dame for some California kids. Notre Dame's always going to have success in California. I don't care how good USC is. Notre Dame got kids out of California during the Pete Carroll era, like big time recruits during the Pete Carroll era. They're going to get there. And I would say that the flip is to that I think not having him at Penn State could potentially open up some more East Coast kids, Midwest kids that they haven't been getting because of the good job he's done there. I don't know how to say your name. Could you please tell me at the bottom how to say this? I don't even want to try to butcher it. It says Georgia still looks like the best team in the nation. I think Georgia clearly is the best team in the nation. I would never say that. I would simply say that just because they're the best team in the country this year doesn't mean they're like past best teams in the country. I don't think that is the case, in my opinion. John Christophic says sudden death overtime is the best. I don't like sudden death overtime. I think there's a reason the NFL did it, because essentially you could say that in many instances that the game is going to come down to who wins the coin toss. And that's no way to decide a football game, in my opinion. Demetrius Rex says, I think he was saying Jarrett Patterson is playing freer, faster, and more physical, not Kane, in reference to the line finding its feet. I thought he was talking about Kane. Now, again, maybe I heard him incorrectly, and he was talking about Jarrett Patterson, but I'm pretty sure he was asked about Kane Madden, I believe. So we'll have to find out. But I'm gonna go back and perhaps I was wrong. I'm not afraid to admit I'm wrong, but I thought Tim asked him about Kane Madden, and I thought his answer was about Kane Madden. But I'll go back and look at it again, Demetrius, just to make sure. Because if I'm wrong, if I'm going to criticize him for what he says, then I want to at least be accurate with it. And if he's talking about Jarrett Patterson, he'd be correct. So we shall see. Okay, I think that is get down to here a few more here. Anthony, I'm sorry about this. Anthony said I got excited for a minute. I'm back to level ground. I just think right now, Anthony, and I'm not trying to like rain on your parade or anything, because what I would say is I just feel like I just want to focus on Notre Dame building right now, and we can have the playoff conversation if they keep building. But right now, I mean, the reality is based on their resume versus resumes of other teams. Notre Dame's not in the top 7 or 8 right now. Shouldn't be in the top 7 or 8 right now. I just want to see them prove that they belong there before we start spending a lot of time of should they be there, how will they perform if they get there, those kind of things. That's all I'm saying. I'm just want to try to focus more on what they need to do, in my opinion, before I get there. And then there's a question, what if Wake Forest goes undefeated? Do they not get in? Oh, they'll get in. Oh, Wake Forest will get in if they are undefeated. What I'm saying is they're not going to go undefeated. I don't think there's a chance in heck. Now, I could be proven wrong, but if a Power 5 team goes 13-0, they're going to get in, and they should get in, unless it's a year where all 5 of the Power 5s are undefeated. I think that would be the only circumstance in which that would happen, but that's clearly there's only 3 conferences of the 5 that have an undefeated team left. Well, no, I guess 4 of the 5, but yeah, so Big 10 does, Big 12 does, SEC does, and ACC does. So 4 of the 5. It's going to be hard for the Big 10 teams to have an undefeated team. There's only a chance for one of them because they all play each other. So we'll see. Jonathan asks, is the downfall of Clemson similar at all to the end of the Lou Holtz tenure? It's just super stacked, but somehow unable to put the pieces together. Does this mean they're about to promote Tony Elliott? Oh, I wouldn't say so. I mean, look, they're coming off a year in which they were a playoff team. I would encourage people to say, hey, let's see how they bounce back. I think the problem that Coach Holtz had late in his tenure was he kept making bad hire after bad hire, and he wasn't able to fix what was wrong because he was making bad hires. I want to see what Coach Sweeney does this offseason before I'm ready to say that the Clemson era is over. I'm one down season doesn't mean to me, oh, they're done. That's my thoughts. Okay, Chad Williams says Notre Dame's margin for error is so slim, they will have to play a perfect game against the likes of Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State. Based on what they've done right now, yes. But again, dude, no one's talking about Notre Dame, in my opinion, at least I'm not talking about Notre Dame right now, the way they've played right now from playing those teams. That's not the conversation. And I still feel like you keep talking about how these teams are like they have been in the past. Bama's not what they were in the past. Georgia's not what they've been in the past. And Ohio State is not what they've been. Ohio State's beating up on a bunch of bad teams. That's what Ohio State always does. They beat up on bad teams. Maryland stinks. Rutgers stinks. Akron stinks. Indiana stinks. Let's see if they're blowing the teams out the rest of the way. Now, if they are, then Ohio State will be a playoff team, in my opinion. But let's just let them play it out first. Their defense still stinks, and they haven't played anybody that can challenge them. And so he says Ohio State is murdering people right now. They also have fixed a lot of their defensive issues. Have they really? How do you know that? Who have they played that's any good on offense? They haven't played anybody that's good on offense. Indiana scored 7 points against them, right? Indiana stinks, right? Indiana scored 15 points against Michigan State and 0 against Penn State. Indiana's offense stinks. They scored 6 against Iowa. They haven't played a good offense yet. Now, maybe they have fixed those problems, Chad, and I'm not saying they haven't. I'm just saying I don't think we know. It's kind of like if Notre Dame goes out the rest of the way and all of a sudden beats, scores 35 to 38 points a game the rest of the way, or 42 points a game the rest of the way, does that necessarily mean that the offense has gotten better and they fix all their issues? Or would you say that maybe it's because they're playing a bunch of terrible defenses? I think knowing the way you think, because you try to be objective and not like, everything is awesome kind of thing, you'd say you'd probably be more, because you don't like Jack Cohn, you don't like the offensive line. One of those I understand. You'd probably say, well, they played bad defenses. You have said that. You said that about USC. So why is that not also true for Ohio State? They're destroying bad teams, and now offensively Ohio State's playing great, but the defense is the one I'm not sold on at this point in time. All right, Jack says this year's Georgia defense is as good a unit as I've seen in the last decade, and even more impressive considering how the game has shifted to helping offenses this year. I get that. I just don't agree with that. I'll ask again, who have they played? Who have they played that's good on offense? I mean, the only game that I was like, wow, impressed by what they did was the Arkansas game. But since then, Arkansas has kind of been proven to be not like really a great offense when they play decent defenses, right? They scored 20 points against Texas A&M and scored 23 against Auburn. They got beat pretty handily by Auburn. Auburn doesn't have a great defense. I think this is an excellent Georgia defense, but one of the best of the last decade. I mean, to me, I don't think they've really played anybody that's really good on offense. I'm not impressed with the teams that they've played. I mean, you talk about beating Kentucky, holding Kentucky to 13 points. Kentucky scored 20 against Florida, 16 against South Carolina, 28 against Chattanooga. It's not a great Kentucky offense. It's a very, very good defense. Like the best defense in college football in 2021. But I don't think this is let me rephrase. I don't think we know yet if this is a decade best defense. I think you have to really be pressured to know that, and I don't think they've been stressed at all by teams, and that's what I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how the rest of the stretch goes. Because here's the thing, Jack, to your point, in a month from now, I could be singing a different tune because they play Florida this weekend. Florida's not a good team, but at least they can score. They play Missouri, who can score. They play at Tennessee, who can score. They play at Georgia Tech, who can score. If they keep doing to those four teams what they've done to the first 7 teams they played, then I'll be willing to have this conversation with you in a more agreeable manner. I just need to see that first. Is I guess where I'm at. I need to see them do it first. All right, I think. Let's see here. All right, A. Murphy with a comment here. Thank you, A. Murphy. Just joined. Thank you for that. Thank you for being with us today. Says, I just joined. Been meaning to say this for weeks. To me, a major reason Freeman's defense is not as explosive as it could be is because his linebackers cannot cover in space, too slow. I don't think speed is an issue for Notre Dame's linebackers, Mr. Murphy. I guess I shouldn't assume who is the Murphy in that picture that's posting this. But the reason I would say I don't think they're too slow. I don't think Drew White's slow. Drew White can run. I don't think Jack Kaiser and J.D. Bertrand are slow. I think they can run. I think they can run pretty well. I think the reason that they struggle in space is because they're not long. I think they're all kind of short. And I think that's something that Maris Liufau would have brought to the table is, yes, Maris is faster than those guys, but it's not a ton. Maris is not just athletic, but he's long. And I think that's the thing about like Jeremiah Usu-Koramoah. Jeremiah was only 6'1.5", but he was long. And so I think that's more of an issue for me. It's not that they can't cover in space. It's that they're not long. And as a group, they're not long. But I think that's been more of the issue for me. I think the biggest reason they haven't been as explosive is because I think they've been forced into some situations because of the play, the secondary, to where they've had to be less aggressive and they can't turn the front loose. I also think part of it is because I don't think Coach Freeman is necessarily completely bought into who this team needs to be. And he's still trying to build a little bit for the future with 3 down fronts and things like that. Because the 3 down front, when you've got, guys like Tyson Ford and Aiden Barrett ends and players like that as your ends and longer 6'6" type of guys, maybe you can get away with that a little bit more. But I would like to see them be more aggressive. I think if anything, to your point, is if you have linebackers that aren't good in space, you should even be more aggressive. Don't play off and let them, because if you play off, right, and you're less aggressive, it forces them to be in space more, actually, because you're not pressuring teams. Whereas if you're more aggressive, you force them to get the ball quickly, which allows the rest of your defense to run and rally to the football. So I'm not saying that's definite, but I think I could make that case, and I think we can have a good discussion about, if anything, I think you can make a case of the opposite. Anthony L. says, preseason BD, you are all about freshmen getting playing time. How do you grade the freshman usage mid-season? So I don't, honestly, and some of you aren't going to like this, but I'm trying to think this. I don't really look at the freshman usage as something I'm going to give the staff credit for, because I think it's more about they're playing guys because they've had to, right? Like Logan Diggs, if Chris Tyree doesn't get hurt, does Logan Diggs play against Virginia Tech? I don't know that he does. He definitely doesn't play as much. If Joe Wilkins isn't hurt, is Lorenzo Styles playing as much as he has? No, he's not. So Joe Alt's playing because of injuries. No, one of those was to a freshman. Kane Barong only played against Virginia Tech because they've had two huge injuries before him, right? So I don't think that I'm willing to give them a lot of credit for playing freshmen other than Buckner and Fisher, other than just because guys have been injured. Having said that, I'm excited about what we've seen from the freshmen. Lorenzo getting his chance and looking good doing it. Seeing Deion Colsey get a chance to play and stepping up with a crucial 3rd down catch. Seeing Logan Diggs play well. I think the future is very bright. And I'm going to have something on this this week about how the injuries have forced Notre Dame to play freshmen, and those guys have shined, and how it makes me very excited for what the future is about. Not just the freshmen, but then you think about sophomores like Chris Tyree and Michael Mayer, still sophomores. They have to come back next year. You look at other positions, tight end, offensive line. The last 2 offensive classes have been really good, and they're bringing in another good offensive class next year at some spots, tight end and wide receiver and running back, that it makes you very excited for what just the talent level that they're going to have on offense these next few years. Okay, let's get to the last couple more. Let's get down here. Yeah, and this is a comment from the Bama fan. He says, Jack, name a team Georgia played that can actually throw the ball. They're good, but let's not act like they've played world beater offenses. And that's where I'm at. I mean, they like Kentucky, for example. Kentucky's I really like what I'm seeing from Kentucky this year. They're a fun storyline, but Kentucky was beating teams and throwing for less than 100 yards a game. I mean, you look at LSU, they beat LSU 42-21. They threw 17 passes, completed 14 of them for 145 yards. They beat Florida 20-13. Their quarterback went 7 of 17 for 87 yards. Threw for 102 yards in a 16-10 win over South Carolina. Went 10 of 18 for 179 yards in a win over Missouri. They were winning because they were a one-dimensional, really good rushing team. You aren't going to beat a team like Georgia being one-dimensional. So to me, that's where I look at it and I say, hey, look, let me see them play a really good offense, and if they can do then what they've done before, whether it's if they hold Florida to 10 or 13 points and hold Tennessee to fewer than 20 points, I'm like, hey, it's a great defense. But I don't think we know the answer to that yet. And that's really where I'm coming from. Blaine Tiller says, does Georgia get left out if they lose the conference championship game? Oklahoma goes undefeated, Cincinnati goes undefeated, and Ohio State wins out. I think it would depend on the score of that game. I think there's a chance they could get left out, but I think that their resume is going to be good enough that if, let's say, Bama beats them by a field goal or a touchdown late, that they'd still have a shot to get in. But look, here's the other thing I'll say about this. We haven't even had the first playoff release yet. Teams are 7-8 games in. As crazy as this season has been, let's wait a couple weeks before we start talking about circumstances, because a lot of these teams are going to get knocked out over these next couple weeks, and it'll completely change where we're at on that. Jared Hardigan says, Coach, while I don't think any game is a given, if we look down the remaining schedule, I got to say it's Stanford for me where I show the next big challenge and give them some fits. Your thoughts? I don't see that at all, Jared, and I appreciate the question, the comment. I don't think Stanford's any good. I don't. I mean, they're 3-4 right now. They just lost back-to-back games to Washington State and Arizona State. Their offense was abysmal against Arizona State. They got beat convincingly by UCLA. They got spanked by Kansas State. They beat a bad USC team that fired their coach the next day. They beat a bad Vanderbilt team by 18. And their win over Oregon, I just can't give them a lot of credit for it because of the circumstances. Now, again, kids showed up and played and all that's great. But, a team, I mean, imagine if like the Friday before Notre Dame's about to play, let's say this Friday before they play North Carolina, right before the game, Marcus Freeman gets sick and has to be rushed to the hospital and he can't cover the game. We'd be looking at whatever happened that next day through the lens of, but what happens if Marcus Freeman is there? Should Notre Dame lose? And so that's kind of where I'm coming from, right? So I'm not impressed with Stanford. They don't run the ball well. Their quarterback can throw it really well. The problem in a matchup against Notre Dame, because I really like Tanner McKee, his arm. He's really strong arm. Last couple games, he's put up some good numbers. I think 2 of his picks against Arizona State were they were behind. He had to kind of force some balls, and he got picked off. Jack Jones made some great plays on him too, on those picks. But he's done some good things throwing the ball. The problem is he's pretty stiff. And he's not real mobile, and against the Notre Dame pass rush, that's a bad recipe. And the other thing too is the Stanford defense is pretty bad. It's not a good defense. They're giving up 28 points a game, and I don't think they've played a lot of great teams this year on offense. So Stanford's defense, they've given up in 6-7 games this year. They've given up over 200 rushing yards 5 times already. They're not a good team. I think matchup wise, because their quarterback's immobile, they don't scare me as much as others. Chad Williams following up, Brian, what makes you think Notre Dame can play with Bama, Ohio State, and Georgia? There's always ifs when you're with your crystal ball predictions. I look at numbers and watch every game. Again, Chad, it's like I feel like you're trying to be argumentative and you're not listening to what I'm saying. Here's what I'm telling you. Right now, I'm not advocating that Notre Dame is that team. I've said this 1,000 times. Right now, Notre Dame is not a playoff team. I even said in my comments, they're not even top 7 or 8 for me. Okay, so I don't understand why you're refusing to hear this. I said if Notre Dame gets to the potential they are as a football team, yes, I do believe they can play with those teams. They can't right now. I've never said they could right now. Okay, so hear what I'm saying. You're trying to put words in my mouth, or you're not comprehending what I'm saying, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful manner. What I'm saying is like I think you're hearing something that's not there. What I'm saying is right now, Notre Dame's not a playoff team. I've literally said that at least a dozen times in the show. What I am saying, however, is that I believe when I look at the talent of this football team, when I look at the players they have, the talent they have, that if Notre Dame were to make the right decisions as a coaching staff, play to their potential as a football team, that yes, I do believe Notre Dame can play with those teams. Do I think they'd go 3-0 against those teams? I'm not saying that, but they can play with those teams. None of those teams are as good as what Bama was last year. None of those teams are as good as what LSU was in 2019 or Clemson was in 2018. There are no great teams this year right now. Now, in a month from now, a team could be playing that way. The light could go on for Bama. The light could go on for Ohio State. The light could go on for Georgia. JT Daniels comes back, and all of a sudden they get Pickens back, and they get Darnell Washington back, and all of a sudden Georgia's out there scoring points and doing all these kind of things. I mean, Georgia, you can score 30 points and beat Georgia right now. I mean, you could score 24 to 27 points and beat Georgia right now if you're a good team. So I need to see those teams play out, but it's more so looking at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is not the team they should be right now. I'm not arguing that. Never said they have. I've never said they should be in playoff consideration. Matter of fact, I spent like 10 minutes of this show to explain to someone why Notre Dame shouldn't be in the playoff conversation right now. What I am saying, however, is that Notre Dame is much further away from what they should be and could be as a football team than those 3 teams. And if Notre Dame gets to that level, Notre Dame can play with those teams. Can they beat those teams? They haven't proven to me that they can yet, even with good teams. But can they play with them? Yes. So you can say you look at numbers and you watch every game. So do I. And what I've seen so far says, as I've said a dozen times in the show, Notre Dame isn't right there right now. I'm talking about what they could and should be, not what they've been. So I don't understand why that's not a pretty easy thing to grasp at this point in time. Timeout Tom says, I feel Clemson's success wasn't sustainable. Clemson recruits regionally, and with the improvements of North Carolina, Kentucky, and Wake Forest, they're no longer the only option for recruits. See, the part of the problem with Clemson is that they haven't been recruiting regionally enough. I don't think any of those 3 teams are ever going to beat Clemson consistently for recruits. Kentucky and Wake Forest are never going to beat Clemson for recruits. Not anyone that Clemson wants. North Carolina can, but not often. I think if you look at Clemson's schedule or roster, I think one of the mistakes they've made, and it's similar to a mistake that I think USC has made. If you look at Clemson's roster, their starting quarterback is from California. A lot of their young receivers they've gone after are from California, right? Joseph Ngata is from California. Bo Collins is from California. They've gone and found offensive linemen from the Midwest, and they've gone all over the country to get recruits. They're being a national team to their detriment. And I felt this was a mistake that Urban Meyer made at times at Ohio State is he had so many national recruits that he lost that heart and soul of what made Ohio State, which is you need a good chunk of kids that are from Ohio that live and bleed scarlet and gray, right? And when Clemson was really good in like 14, 15, and 16, you could look at their roster. And I remember I did a breakdown on this, Tom, and it was like 75% of their roster or more was from a state that attached to South Carolina, or a state that attached to a state. So it was like you could just kind of put a really small circle around just that southeastern region, and the vast majority of the recruits were from some of those reasons. they're always going to do well in Florida when they recruit Florida, but they haven't recruited Florida as much in recent years. I think they've tried to be something that they're not. They've gone away from recruiting dynamic playmakers and instead gone for the big, tall receivers to their detriment because that's really all they have at this point in time. They've gone for these, West Coast California quarterback, which is good, but they've gone out of their region for offensive linemen. They're going to Ohio for linemen and different places for linemen. To a degree, I think you should be able to recruit nationally if you're Clemson. I mean, they got Isaiah Simmons from Kansas, but you have to make sure that your base is still locally, and I don't think they've done a good enough job of that. And I don't think they're not recruiting successfully locally because of those teams. I think they're not recruiting successfully locally because they're not trying. They didn't offer Jalen Sneed. How do you not offer Jalen Sneed? Because they're recruiting, they've convinced themselves they're going to be national. So I think they've made some mistakes in that regards, and he's made some hires or maybe hasn't made some changes that he needed to make. All right, John Keevers just got in and don't know if it's been touched on, but clearly stinks Kyle is hurt, but thank goodness it's now and not in the middle of the week, so DJ can get an entire week of reps and mentally prepare. And that's the case that Vince made. That it's good that it's happening now and not down the road. So we shall see. All right. Let's get to some more questions here. I'm going to have to wrap up here soon because I have some more work I have to get to here. Let's see here. Anthony says, thanks, BD. Any chance you can add gap closer gear in the long sleeve tee? You know what? Now that we're getting close to winter, Anthony, I'm going to make that note. Give me a second. Anthony, I will have that up here in the next 24 hours. That's a really good idea. Really good idea. Richard McGinnis says, if we hire a new O-line coach, we need to go big and get a really top-of-the-line guy. I don't really care about that. I care about a guy that can do a great job, whether it's someone who's already established or someone who's already someone who's young, who could just needs that opportunity. I don't care. Either one. Just get someone who can do the job. Look, sometimes established guys aren't ideal. John Tenuta, Brian Van Gorder. Established coaches aren't always the best option. If you can get one that you think could do a great job, I'm all for that. I'm not against an established guy. I'm just saying I wouldn't only focus on that. That would be my point. I just got a text from Matt D saying he needs gap closer hoodie. We have gap closer hoodies in the store. So those are already there. And he also said Kelly was talking about Madden in the free faster. Look it up. So I was correct. Yep. Oklahoma's not impressive, and I fully expect them to lose a game. I've been saying that for weeks, and they just keep winning. I mean, that's going to be the interesting thing is they just keep winning. And I have felt like when I watched them against like Tulane and I watched them against West Virginia and I watched them barely beat Nebraska, I'm like, boy, this team's going to lose a game, but they just keep winning. And the schedule is, you got Texas Tech at home this week. Well, Texas Tech just fired their coach. You play at Baylor. That'll be a tough one. Home against Iowa State. They're playing better. And then at Oklahoma State. So they could definitely lose a game, and then they'll have a rematch against somebody in the Big 12 title game. But, yeah, I've been kind of saying the same thing you have all year. It's like, oh, they're going to lose a game, but they just keep winning. They just keep winning. Okay, let's get down here. Robert K says even the first playoff ranking is meaningless. Only the last matters. Yeah, that's I don't like that take because the reality is that's only true from the standpoint of it's the only one that actually determines. But look, don't kid yourself that where you're positioned in the first one doesn't matter. If you're positioned 10th and you think you should be 6th, that means there's 5 teams that you 6. Yeah, there's 6 teams you have to leap to get in the playoff. And if they all keep winning, it's not guaranteed you're going to be able to leap those teams. Where if you're 6, then you only have to leap 2 people. It's a lot easier to do. So, yeah, it matters. For all these teams that think they're a playoff team, it absolutely matters. It absolutely matters where you're ranked the first time because it's a lot harder to rise up that late in the season. Because, you don't know what your schedule is. You could say, hey, look, we've got a tough schedule or we've got a soft schedule and other teams. There's all that goes into it. But, look, Robert, I think the first poll does matter. And I think positioning yourself and being in position to where you don't have to leap 7, 8, 9 teams to get there is certainly something ideal. Is it an end all be all? No. I think Ohio State wasn't even the top 15 in 2014 the first time that they came out with a poll. So it certainly can get there. It's not an end all be all, but I also would not go to the level to say that it's meaningless unless you're getting like to a real semantic argument that it doesn't actually, it's not determinative. It's not determinative, but it does matter in my opinion. It does I believe. All right. Q Kibbs 97. Brian, you and Vince are the GOATs for hosting your fans the way you did Saturday. That was awesome and a pleasure. It was a lot of fun. And I was a lot happier coming out of I was a lot happier coming out of that one than I was the first one. I probably shouldn't have been as expressive about my disappointment because I think that was a disservice to the people that did show up. But I just was hoping for a bigger crowd and wanted a bigger crowd. And Saturday we got one. I think the night game probably played a role into that. But it definitely made me feel happier and more encouraged to have more next year. And maybe not all of them are like big where we just do a giant spread, but at least do something every week. Vince and I are going to talk about that this offseason because we'll have to figure some things out about that. But I'll have to figure some things out and see what he can be a part of or not. But I always find it better when there's more people there and food and all those type of things. But my dad was calling me, next year we're going to do a couple real big ones and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see. Hopefully mom and dad's health is good at that point in time. So we shall see. Okay. Real quick answer to this one, Anthony L. Question for the group. Does NIL help or hurt Notre Dame? And I think it helps Notre Dame a lot, in my opinion. Searcher Green 9, wouldn't Watt at Tulane be ideal for us? I don't know if I've said this before. If Chris Watt is going to be the next O-line coach, which I'm not necessarily against, I would only be for it if Harry Hiestand was also assisting, like maybe he was an analyst and he was helping him out. Because that was something that was there last year. I mean, it wasn't just Chris Watt. Chris Watt did a great job as a young coach, but he also had Harry Hiestand there to help him out. Rob Didoff says, Brian, are you shocked that Virginia is still not ranked? I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked, nor do I think it's necessarily wrong, to be honest with you. Because when I look at Virginia, I understand where you're coming from, and I think they're an impressive team, but here's who they've beat so far this year. William & Mary, Illinois, Miami, Florida on the road, in a game they should have lost. They beat Illinois by a point on the road. They beat Duke, crushed Duke, who stinks, and they just beat Georgia Tech. I mean, the only team they've played this year with a winning record is Louisville at 4-3. Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of good wins either, but then they have two losses that were both by 20 points. They lost at North Carolina by 20, and then they lost at home to Wake Forest by 20. I think it's about people don't view the ACC as a very good conference, and they're not wrong. The ACC is not a good conference this year. It's a very down conference in a lot of ways because there's no star team. Now, having said that, I think there's some teams in the ACC that are better than people think. I think Pitt losing to Western Michigan just killed them because I do think that Pitt's a really good football team right now. I mean, beat Tennessee on the road. Tennessee's proven to be a quality team. Alabama ended up spanking Tennessee final score-wise, but that was a competitive game for about 2.5, 3 quarters. But I think Virginia has to show a little bit more. I'll say this. If Virginia goes out and beats BYU the next time they play, I think then they'll jump in because they were like 5th or 6th, I think, in the votes this week. The week before, they got like 1 vote in one of the polls. So I think the fact that they keep winning, people are looking at them more and more. They play at BYU this week. BYU is ranked, I believe, in the AP poll. Yes, they are 25th in the AP poll. If Virginia goes on the road and beats BYU, they'll be ranked. I think that's where it comes down to for me is people just want to see them play that kind of team and win that kind of game is where I think about it. Chet says, Brian, who's the O-line coach in Northern Iowa? Their numbers are great over the last 5 years and put a few players in the NFL. I had one guy that was drafted relatively high recently. To answer your question, I have no clue who that is. And Chad says I need to look into that guy. I like what they're doing. And here's my whole thing, Chad. That's why I don't think it should just be like you got to get Bill Bedenbaugh or you got to get this name guy or that name guy. I mean, there's good coaches all over the place. Some of them are at Oklahoma, some are at Northern Iowa. It's about finding a guy that's going to be a great fit, a guy that can coach his butt off, and a guy that can recruit at Notre Dame. And I don't care where he comes from. He just needs to do a great job there. And I don't think it's like 3 guys that you can only hire these guys. And that's why I've been real hesitant to put names out, because if I put 4 names out, for example, they need to hire this guy, this guy, this guy, or this guy. Number one, 3 of those guys may not even be interested. And so then I start talking about this guy, that guy, and the other guy, and none of those guys are interested. And now whoever they go hire and say, well, it's a disappointment to some people who value my opinion. I don't know how many people those are, but I don't want to turn anybody off of a good coach because I didn't mention him in my first list. And so that to me is kind of where I come from on this subject. Is there's good coaches out there. There are good coaches out there at every level. I'm a believer that if you've got the chops, you got the chops, right? And sometimes you've got guys that have been around the game a long time who at this point in time in their careers just don't have it anymore. And then there's some young guys that don't have the reputation that I would take over a name coach any day of the week. And that's, to me, is find a guy that could do a great job. And whether he's a guy from Northern Iowa or a guy from Iowa or a guy from Oklahoma or from Alabama, I don't really care. Just find a guy that can do a good job and make sure that the supporting cast around him is good. That would be the key for me. And I'm not opposed to doing the 2 offensive line coach thing, which some people do. They'll go tight ends, tackles, and then guard center. You have to make sure that the 2 people can really mesh well. I think it's very important. You got to get people that will work well together. And then you have to have a receivers coach who can also be involved in the tight ends of teaching them route running and things like that. But I think that's where I'm at. Tommy Guns asked about Mike Tomlin and USC. Honestly, I don't know how good of a job he do. I mean, has he coached college football before? He's been in the NFL a long time. I mean, I think he'd probably recruit well, but I don't know how he'd coach at USC because the NFL is such a different animal. So I honestly, Tommy, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. So, all right. Anthony L says, the more you can let us know in advance which games IB will host tailgate next season would be helpful for attendance. I'm from Chicago, and we plan on our games months in advance. Well, I did this year, in my defense, I did start talking about this in like July, that we were going to do Purdue and USC. Maybe next year with the board and some other things, we'll be able to do it better. But yeah, we'll try to do it as early as possible. We really didn't even start thinking about doing it till the summer. And then as soon as we did, I think July is when we started talking about it, but we'll kind of see. So I think that is it, but I appreciate, and I hope to see you. I hope to meet you one of these times, Anthony. I'd appreciate that very much. So, all right, that's going to do it. See, Chad, we're good now. We're good now. I'm all about it. So yeah, we're talking about the O-line thing. You have to make sure you got people that can work together. And also you need to get the right people. So, and that doesn't always mean it's a big name guy. So that's going to do it. So I stayed a little extra because there's a lot of good comments and questions, and I wanted to engage with you guys. We haven't done a lot of that lately, just kind of the mailbag. I kind of miss just interacting and mixing it up and doing some of that stuff with y'all. So I wanted to take a chance today to do that. And it's been a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell, sign up for the message boards at irishbreakdown.com. If you have not already done so, check out our Irish Breakdown store. We've got a lot of new gear there. Somebody bought a flag today for their gym. We've got a blanket that looks like the towel. It looks like that. But it's like a blanket. I bought it for my mom and my wife. They loved it. They said I should sell it. And they're there. And then so Blaine Tiller says, thanks, BD. Miss you on the old boards. Then come to the new board. And you can see the link below, Blaine, at boards.irishbreakdown.com. It's the board that I started, and we are going to talk ball there. And so you can still engage with me on the board. So come on over, buddy. And it's $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year. Or if you really, really want to support us, you can join the Booster Club, which also gets you access. So definitely check that out. Boards.irishbreakdown.com. Love to see you over there. So if you miss me over there, then come join me over here because I'm there to be engaged with. So and we got a late super chat from you. And I really wish you'd tell me how to pronounce your name because I want to make sure I get that right. Because I I just don't. There's so many different ways I could take that name that I'm not sure that I would butcher it. And so I hopefully one of these days you'll explain that to me. Anthony L, take care, y'all. Thanks, BD. Wake up the echoes. So yes, and Noel, as Nolan says, Brian is very active on the boards. Absolutely. He said Ed is fine. Okay, perfect. Ed, perfect. I will. That will make it very, very much easier for me because I don't want to butcher your name, but Ed definitely works. So, Ed, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody else that gave super chats. Thank everybody that had asked questions, engaged. Today was a lot of fun. I needed this. Hopefully, you enjoyed it too. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern. We're going to break down the matchup between the Notre Dame offense and the North Carolina defense. Wednesday will be the reverse, the Notre Dame defense against Carolina offense. Thursday, analysis and game predictions, and Friday, mailbag is back. So, everybody have a great week or great day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, and yeah, let's get after it. So ready for a big week. Talk to you soon.